Say hello to YouTube, Sally.
Good morning. Welcome to Peter Kelly.
There you go.
Yesterday.
Yesterday Sally and I took out the plastic cladding from this nearside panel. It came out in one piece. It's currently sitting over there, leaning against my hedge. It was physically hard work as I expected, but it did actually come out in one piece, and that's simply because the product is a lot thicker than the stuff I took out the crafter. Whole purpose for taking it out was to see what insulation was in this van and whether it was adequate. And I think you can see from the pictures, there's a bit, it's totally inadequate. It's falling out, it's too small. In places, such as behind that sheet of metal there and around this window area, there is none at all. The glue's giving up and it's slipping. This isn't insulation by my definition of the word insulation at all. My view is they put this stuff in there for other reasons, maybe a bit of sound deadening, I don't know, but it is not serving the role of insulation. Anywhere where there's a hole, such as where that fan was there, warm air can get in, find its way up and condense all over the place. You can also see from the amount of dirt along there just how basically unsealed these areas are. There isn't any insulation at all in any of the ribs up the sides. There's a modicum above the sliding door frame. Again, the glue's giving way, it's falling off. Sally's just about to fill up millions of bin bags with this stuff. It's the standard Ichi rock wall that you put in your loft, or used to put in your loft until better products became available. The plastic trim that went round this door frame, beautiful bit of stuff, came off in one piece, reusable, will look lovely even set against any other materials, and the same around there. There were 3 plastic trim pieces that go around the rear doors, which we've removed in one piece, and once this van is properly insulated, Sally may even be able to reuse the existing plastic sheet over there, or use it as a template, cover it in grey carpet or whatever. The white plastic trims can then go back on. It's going to look very, very neat, and those are sort of things you can't readily buy commercially, as far as I know, and it's the sort of thing you can take out of an ambulance, reuse, and it's a real positive benefit. So there you go, quick overview. I'm going to take all the insulation out now. We're hoping to get the ceiling down today. I think this is going to break. There's just too many voids and holes in it, but you never know, we might get it down in one piece.
Is that T-Rex tape as well, isn't there?
Yeah, and Sally now knows what I mean about this tape. That grey tape there, that fights you. That's the strongest thing on the planet. You can stick spaceman to spaceships with that stuff, I reckon. It was extraordinary. The last bit, in that very last corner there, did not want to let go. It was not a happy piece of tape at all. And in fact, if you look there, the tape didn't give way. They've got little plywood furrings, and that split instead. Whereas the glue, that wasn't too difficult. On my van, that glue was really playing hard to get, but on this one it may not have been stuck that well. But wherever there are pressure points, such as bolt holes, you can see those 2 bolt holes there, where the patient seats or the operator seats were, that means the plastic was really screwed up tight to the metal backing, and that makes the glue take very nicely. But they've been fairly sparse, thank goodness, in this van. There's not masses of glue all over the place. The plastic cladding's got timber battens on it to space it out in places, and it all came away on this side quite easily. But as I said, the ceiling I think will break, and I'm almost certain the panel behind me, which is huge and all in one piece, I cannot see how that's going to come off on its own, but you never know. But all in all,
so there's no insulation on this middle part either, is there?
no, there's nothing up there. In fact, yeah, that entire section, literally all the way along, not insulated at all. You can see that's never had any glue on it. This sheet of metal here only seemed to have supported the support for the stretcher board by the looks of it. There's nothing major that was bolted in this big sheet of metal. It's not fully welded on, there's just spot welds along there, and I think that could actually come off with the grinder quite easily. The bolts that you can see, or the nuts rather, rib nuts, you can see there, they are the 3 for the really substantial quality battery carrier, and they, as you can see, are drilled into the framework of the van. So I think this metal plate can come off, and that will enable getting insulation behind it more easily, but we'll see. Sally hasn't decided yet whether to take it off or not. There is a rib behind it, and might make getting insulation behind it difficult. But that one will probably come off. That one there, I have no idea what that one there was for. The only thing that was there was a 12-volt socket, and having all that metal there is overkill. But that one there can probably come off. The one above, the strip one along there, they're the ones that are used to secure the upper lockers. These are all welded in place by riv nuts, and then the top part of the locker goes into similar riv nuts in the ceiling, and then that channel there is aluminium. So this van, there's very little aluminium, just that top channel that's supporting the ceiling. The rest of this is all steel, heavy. Now I've seen on Facebook groups pictures of other vans. The Wilco body conversion, I think, is fully sheeted on the inside with aluminium, but this one certainly isn't. It's just steel, and daftly they seem to have a token effort there of lightening that one up by drilling some holes in it. There are dirty grate beams as well. This is box section steel that these things are welded to. They also supported the seats. It would be probably a bit over involved to take those out because they probably cut them into the ribs. But certainly some of these sheets of metal that aren't required. The methods are extraordinary. That one's riveted on. That one's welded on. That one's welded on. Maybe that one was added at a different time. Don't know. Good morning. Over the weekend, the owner of this van, Sally and I, stripped out the plastic cladding that was originally on the near side, which I filmed yesterday, and yesterday we took out the ceiling panel. We got it down in one piece with just one crack where the goo just didn't want to let go. You can see the standard of so-called insulation on it. These are pre-cut panels glued in place before the sheet of plastic is bonded to the roof of the van. These form and serve zero insulation purposes. They are there as reinforcement for the fixtures and fittings in the ceiling, and because the centre part of this plastic sheet is not supported or glued to anything of any significance, they are there to prevent flexing and drumming of the plastic. They do zero for insulation. You can also see how filthy it is at the back there. That was the end where the doors were. There's a lot of diesel smuts and contamination that's found its way into the vehicle, probably just through the way air is drawn in and out of the van. And it's certainly very, very filthy. You can also see areas where water's run from the condensation dripping down from the ceiling. As I said, all the light fittings have been contaminated with water, and you can see just from the dirt and the tracks. Oh, there's a robin. But there's been water running on that one over there. The piece of foam that was at that end had virtually completely disintegrated and is covered in puddles, basically. This piece of foam here had been broken up inside the vehicle before we started to dismantle it. I think at some point in time they put an inductive hearing loop in for potentially deaf ambulance operators that have hearing aids, and they went through this hole here, so they just smashed everything out of the way so they could get to the ceiling, and I'll show you that in a second. But it's important to understand, as I've repeatedly said, these vans are not insulated for the purposes of keeping them warm. These vans are insulated, I think, predominantly for soundproofing. There's the overhead lockers we removed yesterday as well, from the driver's side. We've put those on scales. That unit alone weighs 55 kilograms. When you are taking them out, you need at least 3 people. These are very heavy. They're held in by bolts. They're bonded in with glue. You undo all the bolts, then you cut the glue away, and you get to the point where that very top run along the very top rail of glue becomes a hinge point, and you cut it away, and eventually the whole thing drops. 3 people minimum. Don't hurt yourself. So I filmed that side yesterday, mentioned a few things about this metal sheeting. Probably going to cut that one off over there. Sally cleaned off all the insulation yesterday, or rock wool, soundproofing stuff. The entire insulation filled that one tiny bag. That was it for that entire side of the van. Can't emphasise enough. Strip these damn things out. They are not suitable used as camper vans, in my opinion, as they are. So, the ceiling is in lovely condition. It doesn't have any glue on it because there wasn't any insulation at all anywhere other than those squares of 2-inch thick poly, whatever you call it, PIR. The ceiling is held on, or is supported by this aluminium framework. It's very nice indeed. Nice flat ceiling. Obviously there's a void there, but there's plenty of room for doing things with. You can see up there in the tray finger there, there's plastic plumbing pipe. Basically that's what it looks like to me. They're using that to run a few cables through that they want to protect from the other harness. It's got the, I think, the reversing camera cables there, and I also think some of the radio antenna cables are in there as well. That's probably quite a good idea. That can be replicated. You can run pieces of conduit through, or pieces of very, very cheap standard domestic plumbing pipe work. Gives you a good conduit. The cabling on the right is mostly the ambulance converters cable harness. They may be the original lighting in there for the rear lights as well. Nearly all of this cabling is coming out. Sally has decided she would like to have the bulkhead completely open. Genesis is coming out completely. I will be removing everything, and even the cabling in the ceiling here for the lights and things, they're going to be in the wrong place, wrong types of connectors, just wrong. So I will be taking it all down. Now if I was building this van for myself, I'd be keeping it all for reuse, but the chances are she's going to be paying a vehicle electrician. It'd be very unlikely he's going to spend 2 or 3 hours preparing a wire rather than just running new wire off a loom, off a reel. So I don't think any of this is going to get reused by Sally in this van, but it'll all end up in a big box for decisions later on. But as I said, this framework, it's lovely. It's not as strong as I was hoping. I was thinking, could you actually hang a hammock or suspend a bed on pulleys from it, so you could actually have a pull-up bed, a manual pull-up bed. But pulling on it, it is literally just designed to support the plastic cladding. They haven't braced it in the centre, so it doesn't have any structural strength. It's actually riveted to aluminium L section. It's well footed. It makes a nice flat surface, and whatever material Sally puts back up, whether it be reusing that board there or a plywood sheeting, is going to be very easy to attach to that. The glue has mostly remained intact on it. I can't see the camera, that's better. And it's relatively flat, so the material will go up there reasonably well. If you look in the corner there, you can see that one of the fixings are used for the, where's my finger? It's cool. There it is, I think. There. Yep. That's a riv nut. The cabinet we took down, the long cabinet we took down, used those riv nuts there and these riv nuts here. So it's very, very, very securely mounted, and it was also glued along the centre sections, all the ribs for the internal partitions, and it was also glued along the plastic along there. But it wasn't glued, finger's gone, it wasn't glued along that bolt line there, which is really handy because that does mean you can actually get a lever under there and cut away all this plastic quite easily. If it had been glued along that line, would have made it a lot harder to remove. But I mentioned just now, they are damned heavy. That's the best side of 10, 11 feet long. When you take them down, be very careful. In this particular cabinet, it had under cabinet lighting, and for some daft reason, most of it, nearly everything in these vans has got connectors on, but for some daft reason these haven't got connectors. They were all hardwired, so we had to actually chisel away at the nice plastic covers they'd made and glued into position to get to the cables to snip them, leaving enough cable on the light so that it can be reused at a later date. And I wanted to make sure I snipped them at the light end because a lot of these are bundled together, and as part of the process of identifying these cables and removing them, I wanted to actually know what they all, I need to know in my mind what they all do. We've removed the vent work. Be careful, there's an open doorway. Where's the camera pointing? There it is. That went to the air conditioning outlets. I think Sally's going to be removing the entire air conditioning unit. which is in there. I think she's got plans for using this over cab area. We don't know if it works yet, but that's not a job I can do. That's a job for an air conditioning specialist, because they will need to actually effectively remove the entire Urbaspatcher system that's been plumbed in this vehicle and reinstate the functionality of the original van's air conditioning there. It's got an air conditioning button, so this van did originally have air conditioning, and this system and maybe even an improved compressor has been added. But if she wants to take all this out, that's a job for somebody else. I will remove the wiring and present the wiring so we know which is plus and minus, plus and minus 12 volts, and I'll also bring the remote control back so that it can be operated. But I don't touch air conditioning. In fact, I don't touch mechanical work of any kind for other people now. Been exploited too often and taken for a ride, so I will stick to doing electronics and electrical work, because that's something I know and understand and can price up within reason. But anything to do with mechanics, which is the primary reason why, for example, removing the mounting that the winch was on, that requires dropping the exhaust down. The vehicle's got to go on a ramp on that. I'm not interested in doing that myself and hurt myself. So the next job is going to get this pig of a one off. This is the biggest sheet of the lot, and it's worth mentioning that sheet over there probably weighs 30 kilograms. They're heavy. They're heavy, they're cumbersome. You'll notice they've got pieces of wood, pieces of plywood screwed to them to frame out the window opening, and the window frames, the plastic window frames that we've already moved, fiberglass rather, are really very nice. They've got a seal on them and they butt up against the window really beautifully, so you get a nice seal, and then the double glazed unit is inside that. Providing that she puts this back together with the same thickness of material, or packs out the seal somehow, this will, these windows will seal up nicely again. But they're just standard bonded windows with a frame, with a seal. There's no insulation around them again, so the plastic probably got condensation on it. But the actual double glazed unit is semi-sealed. It's got air in it between the two panels. But this sheet here, this is going to be an absolute pig to get out. If any of them are going to break, it's going to be this one. You'll see here all these little riv nuts. Unlike these ones up here, which have been cut around and probably installed after, or before rather, the sheet was installed, or the sheets were already pre-drilled and then they just whack a riv nut in there. These, I reckon, are either put in at a later date or even as an add-on. So all these riv nuts here, there's a lot of them, held up one small plastic box for various medical supplies. And it wasn't even a heavy box. It wasn't metal like some of this other stuff we're taking out. Each one of those has been inserted through the plastic into the metal backing behind. The only way to deal with those is I've either got to cut a circle around them, like these, which will destroy in no time a decent hole saw, or I've got to drill them out. And even so, I think this panel, there's a weak point effectively there between these two openings. Whether this panel comes out or not, I don't know. I need to remove the heater out. I can't see it, there it is. I need to remove the heater outlet. I need to remove this box thing, whatever went in there. I'm going to have to take this overhead box down as well because it's in the way, just at the corner there. You can guarantee Sod's Law says that'd be the corner where the glue's fighting the most, and you need to be able to get behind it. And the trick to taking this stuff off is with blocks of wood. Just gently push them along as you begin to create an opening, and let the block of wood apply enough force that the glue and the sealant and the tape and everything else just begins to give. And you can work at it slowly with the end of a saw blade, or just sharpened, or even a garden spade. You're just slowly teasing the glue apart, and then gradually it'll peel away. But this panel's going to weigh 45 kilos. There's going to be a lot of weight. Doesn't matter which way I go from it, there's going to be a lot of weight there, and I suspect I'm going to end up with 3 parts for this one. The good thing about it is, when it snaps, providing it hasn't got into a state like that piece over there has, where it's snapped and the plastic's actually buckled, and it'll be very difficult to get those parts back together again without actually cutting a relief joint in it. But when it snaps completely, it doesn't have sort of like a bent edge to it. It snaps cleanly and flat, so you can stick it back on again, and if you're going to carpet over it, it's unlikely I'm not convinced on this one, but it's probably unlikely you're going to see the join. The carpet should hide it, especially if you tape it first. As long as it goes back on flush both sides. That's assuming it's going to be reused, and I think Sally does intend to reuse this. It will take a lot of work to reuse it because there's a lot of cleaning up to do, and there's a lot of holes to fill because the carpet, if she uses that spray like that stick on self, grey carpet, it will conform and cover a lot of stuff, but it won't cover up everything. But I like that carpet. It's quite nice from a feel point of view, and some of the colours are pretty good as well. One thing that's always noticeable is the van's getting noticeably darker now as we're removing all this white plastic. And this is probably the worst, this is the worst part of any build. You get the thing down to a wreck and you look at it and think, ye gods. Because what I'm doing in here now, what I've done so far, that represents 2 weeks of bloody hard work. I haven't really stopped at all. And it's a lot of physical effort removing this stuff. I don't think a lot of people take it into account. And that's maybe why a lot of people don't bother. As I said before, they're quite happy to live with this inadequate standard of insulation for human habitation. But that's just my view. I'd like to get my hands on a Wilka bodied one of these. Wilka do one almost identical to this. This is an O&H conversion. I wonder if the Wilka's done any differently. Be interesting to see. There's certainly some variations when you look at the modular bodied ambulances. My ambulance over there, my Sprinter box ambulance, is insulated if it's not done very well, and I should have done more in it. But I've seen some of the earlier vans by McNeely, for example. They seem to have quite large voids, and they do use a glass fibre type insulation, and it may well be a lot easier to replace that. This is interesting. Behind what was a plastic insert here is another sheet of metal. I think it's aluminium. I've no idea why they needed to do that, other than the unit on there maybe needed some screening, electrical screening. I don't know, but there's certainly a sheet of metal there, probably glued onto the outer skin, so that it's unlikely that's going to come off easily. There are rivets at top and bottom, but if that's bonded as well, it's going to cause some damage to the outer skin getting off. Fortunately, it's set back enough that it'll be easy enough to insulate over that with something. But there you go, there's a quick overview. And then right at the very top there, if I can show you it, can I get the camera high enough? Yeah, you can just see that zigzag white thing. That's the inductive hearing loop. It goes literally in a loop. And that's something that I think they added at a later date and basically butchered what little insulation there was in the roof as part of the process of getting to it. I may be wrong, but it looks to me like it's been added. There's all different cable ties and things in place. But there you go. Plan over the next couple of days, I doubt that I'll have this done today, is to try and get this sheet of plastic out. And it'd be interesting to see how much steel is behind there, because it's definitely all steel, except for the framework in the ceiling. Be interested to see how much steel is in there, how much of it can remove, because as I think I mentioned, that panel there is going to be very difficult to insulate behind that without taking it off. And I suspect we'll find a similar amount of inadequate insulation falling out or sagging on this side as well.